Hello and welcome. In our previous tutorial, we were able to perform write some code that does some unit tests. One of the test cases was testing the template and the requests and responses, and the other one was testing the users signing up of a user, um, making use of the get user model, which is a customization or which is a reference to the Django authentication or the Django user model. So in this tutorial, we are going to look at deployment. And the first thing we are going to uh, probably look at is there's a file that uh, we created earlier when we were starting this tutorial. There were actually two files. There was this Docker file. You can find it in the repository, and we have this Docker compose.yml. So initially, this file did not, we had added the environment variables for logging into the Postgres database and the environment variable for the secret key for Django. And just we had just added them on this file. But I have changed that and I added a new variable here, which is env file that points to the file name of the containing the environment variables. And I'm making use of the env file configuration option that you can check in the Docker documentation. So if I go back to our code, we have this .env file, which is what Docker looks at or tries to find when you run the Docker Compose start or Docker Compose app rather. So as you can see, it contains the secret key for Django and the credentials for the PostgreSQL database. And we also have another item here, which is debug. So let's quickly go through these items. So the secret key is normally defined in the settings.py file, and it points to, it is a cryptographic key that is normally used by in the Django, in this Django website or this Django project. And once we have created the env file somewhere else, then we can be able to use the OS import and try to use the environment.get, and which checks for this key. This key, think of it as a dictionary in Python, and it looks for the value that is corresponding to this key that is named secret key. So then it goes to the environment in the OS and tries to find this secret key, not to the file itself, but to the environment of the operating system. And then it does that for all these other requirements: Postgres DB, Postgres user. And if we scroll down to the settings for our Postgres, we see that we have these three items pointing out to the OS and the environment variable. So let's see, let's open our Docker desktop, and let's open we have the two containers, one for Postgres and the other one for the web. So let's open the terminal for our Postgres SQL. And then since it's a Linux container, I can just type in the .env, and you see that we have all these parameters. Okay. These are being the same parameters that have been set in the .env file. So we can just try and see if they do correspond. So let me put them maybe side by side. As you can see, we have this Z all the way up to underscore B as the key. Okay. Then you can see we have the rest as Postgres. Postgres. However, if you are deploying these in another environment, you need to change these parameters to correspond to your particular settings. As this is not wise to use a Postgres. It's a common password that is known even to others who may want to maliciously attack your website. So we have these are the environment variables. So let's also check for these web. And I think in an advanced case, you may want to oh, yeah, open the browser instead of opening it inside the terminal. So let me type the .env, and you'll see that we have variables. We also have the secret key here and the Postgres SQL. So in an advanced setup, you may want to do a separation of concerns. You may want to probably not give access of the Django secret key to the PostgreSQL or something else. So that is beyond the scope of this tutorial, but you can look at more in managing the environment variables using Docker. So now let's say we have completed developing and we want to deploy our website. So there's this command, there's this part of the documentation that talks about how to deploy your Django application. And we have this deployment checklist, which is what I'm interested in. Manage.py check deploy. So it checks for these critical settings. Among them is the secret key and the debug and allowed hosts. Yeah, and memory, caching, and the rest, and databases, all these settings. I'm going to share the link. So this is what it checks. So uh, for us, we are going to just copy this command and we can check our deployment using the manage.py. So I'll run this command, docker compose exec, the container name, which is web, python manage.py. Oh, yeah, I've actually copied the command, so I can just paste it. I need to add Python. So it's going to give us some output. And as you can see, in the form of warnings, we have security that states that I've not set there. Secure host, seconds. The other one states that I've not set the SSL redirect, which I believe when you open your website in HTTP, it should redirect to HTTPS. And then we have the session cookie secure and the debug mode, which is set to true. So there are two parameters that we have already set here, the secret key and the debug. So let's see what happens when I set my debug to 0. So in this case, 0 means false, 1 means true. So if I set the debug to 0 and I try to, one thing you should notice that I've actually edited the environment variables, but I have not actually, they won't reflect in the Docker containers. So I need to stop my container by running docker compose down. And then I'm going to start my containers once again, and it's going to fetch the new set environment variables. So I'm going to run docker compose up in a detached mode, and then I'm going to check. I'm interested in this debug value, and I think it's probably going to show some warnings inside the logs. Yeah, so it seems not to pick up this value. Anyway, nevertheless, let's see if what happens when we add this secure host seconds. And actually, I can try and look for it in this documentation. And it is in the CSRF cookie secure. So let's see what happens when we trying to copy this, copying the entire thing. Anyway, I can just work on these others. So for now, I'm going to remove even the debug, because I've realized it's not working, and I'm going to edit it inside the settings .py file and set it to false. And I'm going to edit these other parameters. I had actually commented on them. So for this one, I'll just give it some value here. And for the session cookies, I can set them to true. And this other one, I can also set it to true. And the other one also, I can set it to true. And these will, the other item I sure I last needs to add some items here on the local hosts. They are already added in the allowed hosts. So let's see what happens when I run the check deploy command. So yeah, as you can see, it's also it has other additional issues. So the other warnings have disappeared, and I can set this to true. And I can also set this other one to true. Okay, so let's test our the deployment settings. And you'll realize now that this Django is ready for deployment. Uh, so most of these settings, or I believe all of them, they revolve around the SSL or the TLS or the HTTPS configuration. But there are many others which are shown in these documentation for Docker, for Django. And in the next step, we are going to see how we can include these variables, because they are all variables inside the .env file because they are not there. So yeah, so this is how you can check your deployment using the deployment checking settings from within Django. This brings us to the end of this tutorial. And in the next tutorial, we're going to see how we can incorporate these variables inside the .env file for Docker in readiness for deployment in a production environment. Thank you for watching.